You know what most people get wrong about becoming a millionaire? They think it requires brilliance, connections, or some kind of secret knowledge that only the elite have access to. But after 25 years in finance, after analyzing thousands of portfolios and watching people succeed and fail in real time, I can tell you something surprising. Some of the most impressive fortunes I've ever seen were built completely by accident. Not by geniuses, not by Wall Street insiders, but by ordinary people who simply made a few decisions that quietly changed everything. And today, I'm going to walk you through their stories. Not the polished, glamorous versions you hear on TV, but the real ones. Messy, unexpected, and incredibly human. Because hidden inside these stories are patterns. And once you see those patterns, you start to realize something powerful. Becoming wealthy might not be as out of reach as you think.
Let me tell you about a man most people would never look twice at.
His name was Ronald. He worked as a janitor for most of his life. No degree, no financial background, no connections. Just a quiet man, cleaning offices after everyone else had gone home. Now, if you had met him back then, you wouldn't have guessed anything unusual. He drove an old car, wore simple clothes, lived in a modest home. Nothing about him screamed wealth. But when Ronald passed away, something extraordinary happened. His estate was valued at over $8 million, and no one saw it coming. Not his co-workers, not his neighbors, not even some of his closest acquaintances. So what did he do? Did he invent something? Start a company? Win the lottery? No, he did something far less exciting and far more powerful. He simply invested, consistently. Every month, without fail, he bought shares of strong, stable companies. Companies you already know. And then, he did something that most people can't do. He didn't sell. Not during crashes, not during recessions, not when the news screamed panic. He just kept buying and holding for decades. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Ronald wasn't trying to become a millionaire. He wasn't chasing financial freedom. He wasn't optimizing strategies or reading market reports every morning. He simply believed in one thing. If I keep putting money aside, something good will happen. That's it. No complex plan, no obsession, just quiet consistency. And over time, compounding did the rest. Let me explain something most people underestimate. Compounding is not impressive in the beginning. In fact, it's almost boring. You invest a few $100s, and after a year, you barely notice a difference. After 5 years, it still feels slow. But somewhere around year 15, 20, 25, something changes. The growth stops being linear and starts becoming exponential. And if you stay in the game long enough, that's when ordinary people start looking extraordinary. Ronald didn't beat the market. He didn't outsmart anyone. He just outlasted them. And that is a lesson most people ignore.
Now let me tell you a different story. This one is even more accidental.
A woman, let's call her Sarah, started working at a small tech company in the early 1990s. Nothing fancy, just another job. As part of her compensation, she received stock options. Now, at the time, those options didn't seem like a big deal. In fact, she barely paid attention to them. She didn't track the stock price, didn't follow the company news. Life got busy. Career, family, responsibilities. Years passed, then decades. One day, while organizing old documents, she stumbled upon something she had completely forgotten. Those stock options. So she decided to check their value. And what she saw didn't make sense at first. The numbers looked wrong. Too big. Way too big. That small tech company, it had quietly become one of the biggest companies in the world. And her forgotten shares were now worth millions. Think about that. She didn't plan it, didn't strategize, didn't even pay attention. And yet, she became wealthy. Now, before you say, well, that's just luck, you're partially right. Luck played a role. But here's what's important. She stayed long enough for luck to find her. Most people interrupt their own success. They sell too early. They panic during downturns. They jump from one opportunity to another. But the people in these stories, they stayed. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Let me tell you something that might sound strange coming from a finance guy.
Doing nothing is often the most profitable strategy. I've seen traders with advanced algorithms lose money, while simple, patient investors quietly build wealth in the background. Why? Because activity feels productive, but in investing, activity often destroys value. There's a famous idea in finance: the more you trade, the less you make. And over the years, I've watched this play out again and again. People react emotionally. They buy when things are exciting and sell when things are scary, which is exactly the opposite of what works. But accidental millionaires, they don't play that game. Sometimes because they don't know how, and sometimes because they're simply too busy living their lives. And ironically, that lack of interference becomes their greatest advantage. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, these are interesting stories, but what does this have to do with me? Fair question, because not everyone is going to stumble into millions. But here's the key idea I want you to remember. These people didn't have perfect strategies. They had simple behaviors repeated over time. And in the next part, I'm going to show you something even more surprising. People who became millionaires by making decisions that didn't even seem financial at the time. Decisions about where to live, what to keep, and what to ignore. And trust me, some of these stories will completely change how you think about money.
Let me ask you something. What's the biggest financial decision most people ever make?
It's not investing in stocks. It's not starting a business. It's where they choose to live. Now, here's a story I've seen play out more times than you'd expect. A young couple in their late 20s buys a small, slightly outdated house. Nothing special. In fact, most of their friends think it's a bad idea. Why would you buy there? That neighborhood is dead. It's too far from everything. But they weren't thinking like investors. They just wanted something affordable, somewhere they could build a life. So they buy the house. They fix a few things over time, paint the walls, replace the floors. Nothing dramatic, just slow, steady improvements. Then something happens. A new road gets built nearby. A few businesses move in. A coffee shop opens. Then another. Suddenly, people start paying attention to the area. Prices begin to rise. At first, slowly. Then faster. Then aggressively. Fast forward 15 years. That bad decision turns out to be one of the best financial moves they ever made. Their modest home is now worth 5, sometimes even 10 times what they paid. And here's the important part. They didn't predict any of this. They didn't analyze market trends or study urban development. They simply stayed long enough for the world around them to change. You see, wealth doesn't always come from what you do. Sometimes it comes from what you hold on to.
Now let's shift gears, because not all accidental millionaires deal with stocks or real estate.
Some of them start with something much simpler: curiosity. There was a man who loved collecting old things, vintage watches, rare coins, first edition books, not because they were valuable, but because he found them interesting. At flea markets, garage sales, small antique shops, he would pick up items that caught his eye. Most of them were cheap, almost insignificant. Over the years, his collection grew, shelf by shelf, box by box. And then one day, something changed. The market for collectibles exploded. Suddenly, people were willing to pay serious money for the kinds of items he had been casually buying for decades. He had pieces that were now worth thousands, sometimes tens of thousands each. Items he barely remembered buying. When everything was evaluated, his hobby turned into a portfolio worth millions. Now again, was there luck involved? Of course, but there was something else too. Time, consistency, and genuine interest. Because here's the truth most people overlook. He didn't quit. He didn't sell early. He didn't treat it like a short-term opportunity. He simply kept going, long enough for the world to catch up to what he already had.
Let me tell you about another kind of accidental millionaire. This one is more subtle, less dramatic, but incredibly powerful. A man starts his career at an average company. Entry-level position, nothing impressive. He works hard, shows up every day, learns the business, builds relationships. Years go by, he gets promoted, then again, and again. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Instead of constantly switching jobs for small salary increases, he stays. And over time, his income doesn't just grow, it accelerates. But that's not the real story. The real story is what happens behind the scenes. With each promotion, his bonuses increase, his stock compensation grows, his access to opportunities expands. By the time he reaches his 40s, he's not just earning more. He's accumulating assets at a much faster rate than he ever could have imagined in his 20s. And almost without realizing it, he crosses the $1 million mark. No viral success, no big break. Just compounding effort over time. And here's something most people don't want to hear. Consistency is often more powerful than brilliance. Now let's step back for a moment, because by now, you might be starting to notice a pattern. These people didn't chase wealth. They didn't obsess over it. They didn't try to optimize every move. Instead, they built systems, or habits, or environments that quietly worked in their favor. And here's the most important insight so far. Their advantage was invisible. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't timing. It wasn't even discipline in the traditional sense. It was, they avoided the mistakes that destroy wealth. Think about that. Most people don't fail because they never had a chance. They fail because they interrupt their own progress. They panic. They overreact. They try to be clever at the wrong moments. But accidental millionaires, they often succeed because they don't interfere. Now in the next part, we're going to go even deeper, because some of the most surprising stories involve people who became wealthy by making decisions that had nothing to do with money. Who they married, who they surrounded themselves with, what habits they adopted without even thinking. And once you see this, you'll start to understand something powerful. Wealth is not just a financial outcome. It's a byproduct of how you live your life. And trust me, what's coming next might be the most unexpected part of all.
Sometimes, wealth isn't built by money itself. It's built by connections. But here's the twist. The people I'm talking about didn't network like pros. They didn't attend conferences or give speeches. They didn't collect LinkedIn connections like trophies. Instead, they just were themselves. Take a man I'll call David. He had a small circle of friends, the kind most people call ordinary. One of them started a side project, just a small idea, nothing serious. David didn't invest right away. In fact, he almost forgot about it. But years later, that project exploded. And because he had been quietly supporting and advising his friend, he received a small equity share. Small, almost negligible. At first, it wasn't noticeable. Then, 5 years later, that small equity became worth over $1 million. David never chased it. He didn't strategize for it. He just maintained the relationship, stayed loyal, and trusted his friend. Lesson? Sometimes the wealthiest moves aren't financial. They're human. Who you know, and more importantly, Who you stay connected to can have enormous long-term consequences. Here's a story you'll like if you think you aren't smart enough to get rich. There's a woman, let's call her Emily, who never made a huge salary. She didn't inherit money. She didn't get lucky stock options. But she did something simple yet profound. Every week she read articles, books, journals, biographies, anything she could get her hands on. Not just about finance, but about life, about people, about patterns. Then one day she noticed a trend in her readings. A small, overlooked sector in her city's economy was about to boom. She invested in it cautiously, not thinking she was making millions. Years later, Emily had quietly built a portfolio worth well over 7 figures. See the pattern here? Notice how subtle it is. Most people think wealth is about big moves, sudden strokes of genius, or luck. But often it's the small, consistent habits, the things no one notices, that accumulate and compound over decades.
Here's one of my favorites. People spend their lives listening to experts, financial gurus, professional advisors, even friends and family. And sometimes following that advice leads to mediocrity, or worse, loss. I met a man, Mark, who was given sound financial advice by every professional he consulted. Sell that stock, it's risky. Don't buy that property, it's in a bad area. Diversify into everything, just to be safe. Mark ignored them. Not recklessly, not blindly, but he trusted his own judgment and observed quietly. Years later, that same property he bought, the same stock he held, became the foundation of his $1 million net worth. Sometimes resisting conventional wisdom, when backed by patience and observation, is more powerful than following every expert recommendation. Now, let's talk about luck, because luck exists. I won't sugarcoat it. But here's the nuance. It's not about being lucky once. It's about being positioned to capture luck consistently. Accidental millionaires are lucky because they put themselves in situations where luck can find them. They invest consistently, like Ronald. They keep forgotten stock options, like Sarah. They nurture relationships quietly, like David. They practice small, consistent habits, like Emily. The common thread? They weren't desperately chasing luck. They just stayed engaged with the world long enough for opportunity to notice them. By now, you might be asking, Mike, are you saying anyone can become a millionaire accidentally? Not exactly. I'm saying the door is wider than most people think. It's not genius. It's not timing. It's not magic. It's about consistency, patience, and subtle behaviors. Let me summarize the key lessons. Time beats timing. Wealth compounds when you give it decades, not days. Hold, don't panic. Interfering with progress is often the biggest mistake. Curiosity compounds too. Learning, observing, and exploring creates opportunities accidentally. Relationships matter. The right connections, even small ones, can create massive outcomes. Ignore unnecessary noise. Conventional advice isn't always correct. Sometimes your intuition works best. And finally, luck favors the patient. Accidental millionaires don't rely on luck. They position themselves for it without even knowing it. Before we wrap up, let's talk about what you can do today. The accidental millionaires didn't do complicated things. Their success was built on simple, repeatable habits. Here's a short list. Automate your investments. Put aside a fixed amount monthly. Forget about it. Let compounding work quietly. Stay long-term. Don't sell in panic. Don't chase hype. Let your assets grow over decades. Invest in what you understand. You don't need to follow every trend. Focus on sectors or companies you genuinely get. Keep learning. Read books, observe patterns, notice opportunities. Knowledge compounds, just like money. Surround yourself with the right people.
Your relationships shape your access to opportunities. Even small, supportive connections matter. Ignore noise. Advice, predictions, panic. Most of it is distraction. Stay focused on your own plan. The key: consistency beats brilliance. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to show up patiently every day in small but meaningful ways. Let me leave you with 3 stories that are almost unbelievable. Story 1. The Forgotten Patent. A man invented a small tool decades ago. It wasn't revolutionary. He filed a patent and forgot about it. Years later, a company started producing a similar device. They owed him royalties. When he cashed them out, he realized he had millions waiting in the bank. He didn't plan it. He didn't chase it. Luck found him because he was in the system quietly. Story 2. The Family Business That Grew Silently. A woman inherited a tiny, struggling family business. She didn't aim for wealth. She just wanted it to survive. She worked steadily, improved operations slowly, and stayed patient. Over 20 years, the small business transformed into a regional powerhouse, quietly creating a 7-figure net worth for her. Story 3. The Stock She Ignored. A man bought shares in a small tech company in 1998. He didn't check the stock for 15 years. When he finally did, it had grown from a few $1,000s to over $1 million. He didn't sell early. He didn't try to time the market. He just forgot it existed. And that was the secret. Notice the common thread. They stayed the course. They avoided overthinking. They let time, patience, and consistency do the heavy lifting. Now, let's distill everything you've heard into one core truth. Wealth is the byproduct of life lived well over time. Choosing the right habits, being patient, staying consistent, learning continuously, nurturing relationships, ignoring unnecessary noise. You may not become a millionaire overnight. You may not win a lottery or get lucky stock options. But if you align your behaviors and decisions with the patterns of accidental millionaires, the odds start working in your favor, almost magically. Here's what I want you to do right now. Audit your daily habits. Are they moving you forward or just keeping you busy? Automate your small wins. Savings, investments, learning, make them effortless. Patience is your secret weapon. Check progress yearly, not weekly. Avoid panic during market drops or life turbulence. Notice opportunities quietly. Keep a journal. Observe trends in work, hobbies, and relationships. Small choices accumulate. Stay in the game. The biggest mistake is leaving early. Persistence compounds faster than cleverness. Accidental millionaires teach us something profound. Wealth is not always about brilliance. It's about consistency, patience, and positioning yourself in life's right places. You don't need to be lucky. You just need to stay long enough. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to show up. And sometimes the richest moments are the ones you almost ignore. So here's the takeaway. Live thoughtfully. Invest consistently, be patient, and let life quietly reward you over time. Because sometimes the best way to become a millionaire is to accidentally do all the right things. Remember, wealth is less about chasing money and more about building the life where money chases you.